Hello and welcome to Journey Lines, the podcast answering the question, how did they get there? I'm your host, Kibben. Each episode, I invite a guest to complete a reflective exercise, plotting the highs and lows of their career against a line of neutrality. Together, we talk through the ups, downs, and everything in between. Except for today, we've got a little bit of a journal line instead of a journey line, and I am so thrilled to introduce today's guest, Kat Kibben. Kat, how are you?
I am so good and so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. A longtime fangirl. We met on LinkedIn, and I have just been enamored with your life since.
Ditto. I find your posts so healing in the way that so many people create this little mirror of what they want their life to be. And I learned over many, many years that a lot of people were making up that mirage. And you do such an incredible job of being really open in a way that
talking about my failures.
No, it's, you know what I think it is? It allows space for no shame around the truth.
I'm going to hang that on my hat. Thank you.
Yes. Get it monogrammed, whatever you need to. I
tattooed across the forehead.
Like you've done something really, really great, and please don't stop.
Well, thank you. I will keep on posting and we'll keep looking forward to your posts, but this is not about me. This is about you. And before we dive into your history, tell me what you got going on today. What's up in your life?
Yeah, today has been a lot of sales calls. It's the beginning of the year. And so we're doing all of the setting things up for this year. And I'm doing something new, which is bringing sponsors into my world, which means a lot of calls with a lot of HR tech vendors who would typically be showing me a demo, but for once I get to sell back to them.
Please take all of their money. They have stolen so much time and money from me. Take it back.
I'm doing it for all.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really cool. Are you looking to have them sponsor the work you're doing, speaking events?
It's a little bit of both, but mostly my writing. So I've had a blog for about 10 years, and this year I'm taking on interesting questions and problems we've never tried to solve in recruiting. So for example, we'll take on the topic of interviewing, but I'm not going to talk to you about optimizing your questions and how long it should be. I'm actually asking the question, is the system of you and I sitting down and looking at each other and asking questions the best way to decide if you can do the work? And then we'll talk about building a process from there.
Ooh, I love it. I really like thinking about the foundations and then the process and then the decorations, right? The interview questions, the times, the metrics, etc. Cool.
You know what's funny is as you were saying that, the foundation, the process and all of that, that was the same thought process I went through when you asked me to do this journey line. It was there were a million different directions I could take to talk about a stop between here and there, right? I'll be 40 this year. There's a lot of ups and downs that have happened in my life, but it's almost taking that step back to say, what does good mean to me? And that applies to work. It applies to life. It applies to how we show up. And I think so often we attach our goals and outcomes to what good means to everybody else instead of us, which is why I love your LinkedIn and probably why I love this podcast too.
I mean, that hits so hard. I have measured my success and measured good and measured, I did it against other people's perceptions. And recently, to your point, I just want to do it for me. What is good for me? What is good for my company is often very different questions than what is good.
I read a book called The Laws of Happiness many years ago, right when I started my company. And one of the most interesting laws that I've cited 1,000 times in the last 8 years is comparison is a thief of joy.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's that same bucket of we build our goals based off comparing other people and what they're sharing and what they say and all of these things. And the reality is no, it's just your journey.
That's one of my favorite lines. And the first time I heard it was in a yoga style class with flexibility. And I was comparing my splits to somebody else's splits. And immediately the instructor, it's the thief of joy. And I was like, it changed my outlook on life. I got to put that book on my list. Yeah. All right. Well, now that we know what's happening today, I have got your journey/journal line in front of me. And it looks like we are starting off in maybe college. Kick us off. Where are we at in time and space?
Yeah, so the very first place we are going is to when I wrote my college essay.
Oh, before college.
Yeah, we are going to like the first piece of writing that I distinctly remember creating and someone telling me it was good. Because you got to understand, I'm an outlier to my family, big time.
Ooh, say more.
If you look at both sides of my family, I am the third person to go to college, and my parents are the first two. And my dad grew up on a farm that has been in my family for 100 and something years. And my family still owns that. I actually own a chunk of it now. And our joke on the farm was, you can be a teacher, you can run the farm, or you can do nothing.
Oh, those are your options. Teacher, farm, that's it.
It was unheard of that he would even go and join the military. But for him, it was military or nothing. That's truly how he saw his future. And so he decided that would be his path. He actually only went to college because on paper, he could see that he would make more money if he went to school. My mother, on the other hand, my grandmother's came over here from Germany when she was 18 years old. She was a single parent to 3 kids. And she put a lot of pressure on her kids to figure things out. And the path on that side was like, be a doctor. Like the bars were insanely high because there was just no imagination for what you could be. And also, both of my parents are military. Both of them are accountants. They are very literal, specific, quantitative people. And you can imagine what it was like having a little creator in the house who wanted to go to their desk and journal for hours.
Wild, little bit different.
Yeah, but it was like that one thing that I could be good at. And I just loved it because I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at tests. I didn't really love running and pushing.
I mean, who does? Who does love running?
I tell everybody, if you see me running, you better run too.
Same. There is something that you don't want to find.
Right? But so I wrote this college essay with the help of my English teacher, who I had my freshman year. And then I was like a student aide when I was a junior. And then she kind of like was my mentor for that full time. And I applied to my dream school, which was Syracuse University, with this essay. I applied early admission. And I will never forget this as long as I live because everybody was getting their big envelopes and I hadn't gotten mine yet.
That's a tough time. In the off chance I have non-American listeners who maybe haven't experienced this. Yeah, you either get, back in the day, before emails, you got a tiny envelope or a thick envelope. And you wanted the thick envelope.
Yes. Right? And I got one better. I got a call from the head of the communications school who said he read my essay. He believed I had a lot of talent as a writer, and he wanted to personally welcome me into the school.
Whoa, no one gets a phone call, Kat.
In 2003, they most certainly didn't.
That's amazing. Do you remember or do you mind sharing what the essay was about at a high level?
Yeah. So it was a metaphor, an extended metaphor for how going to Syracuse would be the home run of my life. If anyone, this is going to tell my age, and probably anyone who gets this reference is of my age, but the movie It Takes Two with Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, they have this line that they use repeatedly through it about it's a swing for this, it's home run, bottom of the ninth. Yeah. And it's like love. That's what they talk about in the movie because I actually just rewatched it over the holidays. And they talk about how love is supposed to feel like bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, down by 3, 2 outs, and you take that swing and you hit a home run. So I wrote an extended metaphor about that home run feeling.
Gorgeous. And sounds like it did you well. I assume you went to Syracuse.
I did not.
We what?
I didn't.
What happened?
My mom is an accountant. And my mom, I told her that day, and I will never forget this as long as I live. She pops open a spreadsheet and she
No, that's what happens when I'm in trouble.
She's calculating money over time. And she's explaining to me how going to a private school costs 4 times. At the time, it was $40,000 a year to go to Syracuse, and it was $10,000 a year to go to Penn State, which I had also been accepted to. We had in-state tuition. She had actually chosen the state of Pennsylvania when my brother was born 15 years prior as our state of residency because it had the most public college, like the most opportunity as far as public universities.
Why? Well, I mean, I kind of get that if you're coming from, a family that go to education. What a thoughtful pick from your mother.
And I went to Penn State. I didn't even visit once before I got there on day one because I was so mad.
You were just, fine, this is what I'm doing, but I don't have to like it.
Exactly. And
it
was the best experience of my life. Truly.
I hate it when mom's right.
I know. But the reality is you never end up where you don't belong.
Ooh, great perspective. Did you still go for communications?
I ended up there. I thought I was going for marketing. Like I was sure I was going to be an agency director and all of this stuff, but I could not pass business calculus. I took it 3 times. And on the 3rd try, the teacher sat me down, and I had been in his class every single time because there were like 2 people who taught the class in the entire university.
And by your 3rd go around?
Yeah. And he's like,
this might not be for you.
Yeah. And he says, well, there are many paths to marketing that don't involve a business degree. And he sent me on to my advisor, an advisor in the communications department. And I said, give me a degree that does marketing with no math. And she was like, I've got just the thing.
I love that. I am a hospitality graduate for my undergrad. And very similarly, the math requirements were very low, but good business acumen. But calculus was not in my roadmap.
I took like a math 25 and other people were copying off of me because I was this close to passing the other class, but I kept missing the mark. And it kind of changed my path, but it also set me up that right after school, I could kind of do anything because communications was so broad. It wasn't a marketing degree where it was obvious that I should go get a marketing job. And that was actually the next line in my journey was kind of the path after school. When I ended up at a tutoring center. So back in the day, Kaplan had kind of 2 sections. Oh, you did the Kaplan rounds too?
Oh, yeah. I didn't work there, but there was Kaplan next door to like the Mathnasium, and those were places my mother took me in school due to low performance.
Kindred souls. Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
So my job after school was to be one of those teachers and to run one of those centers.
Bless you.
Which how that added up to the communications degree, I have no idea. But Kaplan came to Penn State and did like a recruiting day. And so I, being the diligent senior, was like, I got to get a job. And so I just kept showing up to a lot of random things. And this was the thing that connected, right? So I taught kids 4 to 14 reading, writing, and math. It was next door to a place where people learned instruments, and I'll never hear a trumpet without kind of doing one of these numbers again, like the cringe,
That's not a healthy studying environment.
And they were right on the other side of my wall of my office. And so if they had lessons, I had a soundtrack.
Oh, man, how delightful for you.
I know.
So while you're doing this, you meet somebody named Hope?
Yeah, a 5-year-old named Hope Hayden, who, if by some miracle her father Clint hears this, he should know that he completely changed my life. Because when you learn to read, you learn sight words and then you learn comprehension. So you kind of learn the word has meaning, and then you learn how to put words together in order to create sentences. And that's kind of the infrastructure of reading. And we have programs built around that. So the first one is the sight words, and the second one is this more advanced making sentences. And I loved this kid. She was my first student every Saturday morning. And so I would go early and mom would come early and kiddo. And she actually had twin siblings who they also came. So they would like play at the front while we did practice in the back. And if you've ever been to a Kaplan tutoring center, they gamify everything. And so all of it is like scorecards and basketball hoops and all this stuff. But then when I was selling the second program, mom didn't come that day. Dad did. And he came in a suit on a Saturday morning, which, again, I grew up in a military family on a farm or in a really tiny house on a military base. And so I didn't really have the whole, like, I wear a suit to work or I look nice and get dressed when I go.
Especially not on a Saturday morning. Who's suiting up?
At 9 a.m.
Goodness.
And this guy marches in a nice suit.
Clint.
And we sit down and I was like, all right, well, today is Hope's final lesson and I'm explaining everything and selling the next program and the value of that program for a kid like her specifically. And about halfway through, he kind of like puts his hands behind his head and starts leaning back in the chair and looking at me with like a very curious look. And I had absolutely no business acumen at the time or poker face. I still don't have a poker face. And I said, what? I just stopped what I was doing.
Just blunt.
Yep. I still have a bit of this. No surprise there.
I think it's a good quality to have.
You grow up in a military family. You learn orders and clarity. So
it's kindness.
And he just laughs at me. Like, it just starts cracking up. And he's like, you're smart. And I think I'm going to hire you.
Sorry.
And I'm like, one more time.
Sir, this is a Kaplan?
Do you need to learn comprehension? Because I have a job. What I find out later is he used to run a recruiting firm. And he was the head of that recruiting firm. He had scaled it to a pretty successful level. And he had departed that recruiting firm and he was creating an HR technology called Visual CV. It still exists today. It was basically LinkedIn if you removed the networking component.
Okay.
So we were
like an online home for your resume, portfolio, career history.
Exactly. An online resume.
A visual CV, if you will.
Visual CV. And a lot of our ads had to do with killing the resume, which is so funny because they still try to do that stuff. And every time I see it, I'm like, yeah, kill it, man. I've been trying to kill it since 2009. But long story short, he opened every single door to actually, when I think back on my entire journey line, it was that moment. And so many people look for that perfect first job. And I always think back to that because if on paper at the time, I would not have told you that was the perfect job. Okay. I was making $32,000 living in.
2009, you were kind of crushing it.
In Washington, D.C.
Less crushing it.
I could not afford an apartment within 2 hours of my work.
That's horrific.
In DC. That's 2 hours.
And you're there on a Saturday morning doing.
I work Tuesdays to Saturdays, 10 to 9. Okay. And on our off days, they would bring us in to do training on sales, on marketing, on all of teaching, because we taught.
And that's a consuming job.
For a 21-year-old. Yeah.
I mean, you're pulling 10 to 9. That's an 11-hour day. And then you've got, wow, okay. And then you've got to commute.
Yep. No overtime.
So shout out to Clint, who's trying to get you out of this situation.
I showed up in jeans and he still hired me. I didn't realize it was like a real interview. This guy just told me to go to the place at this time kind of thing. So I thought like, this is coffee. And when I walked in, he was like, okay, so in the future, when you go to an interview, you wear a suit and you bring more than one copy of your resume. And he proceeds to, at no point, and I really want to emphasize this too, because this is how opportunity works, true opportunity. He's an entrepreneur, okay? And he's running a lean business. And he says to me, this is how much you're going to make because that's market value. It was double what I was making.
I mean, shout out to those. I had a similar situation moving from Florida to San Francisco, said what I wanted to make. The person who hired me said, no, we're going to pay you twice that because that's what the market rate is. And I think that's really powerful especially for those of us with HR, people, talent acquisition umbrellas, that's a real powerful sentence right up front.
Yep. He also, and I'm guessing this is his recruiting background kind of turning into really good leadership. He also said, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be the CMO. And he said, okay. And he went out and hired the best CMO in the world. She was actually one of the first marketing hires at Netflix and brought her in, Camille Watson, and she became my mentor and boss.
Oh my gosh.
She's the reason I got into social media. She literally guided me. I was a dial for dollars account executive on
Smile and dial, babe.
Yep. And I mean, they taught me a lot, definitely helped me learn what doesn't work in this market, and had a lot of recruiters laughing in my face because I did not understand that you couldn't just kill the resume.
Aren't we just done with it? I said it. I murdered it. We're done. It's fine.
Unplug it. Replace it. Like, I
Unplug
didn't know what an ATS was. And I slowly but surely worked my way into the marketing department. I remember the head funder of our company was walking down the hallway one day and he said, how many Facebook followers do you have? And I was like, I don't know. And I pulled up my phone and I tell him, and he was like, you do social media now.
Oh, great.
But that's how
I'll go figure that out.
First social media hire at monster.com. That's how I became the first social media hire at care.com. And really got my chops in understanding the relationship between someone who wants work and someone who's hired.
Gorgeous. So how long were you at Clint's company learning the ropes of marketing?
Until the day that we ran out of money during the dot-com bubble. And I was the very last person sitting with a very thin envelope with my separation agreement in it.
Back to the size of those envelopes.
And the lights were off, and it was just me and the COO there. And literally my job was to make sure the website was still online and to respond to anyone who sent a help email. And in between, I would spin in my chair.
Woof. Woof.
Spin in my chair and waited. And it kind of like started that career path, right? I did it before like my next big moment. And when I think back on my life, I literally just like marched my way up, right? I went from there to Monster to Care to being a VP of marketing. I mean, that quickly. And then I got a chief whatever offer, right? But I had just decided to start my own company.
Oh, that's a big deal, says someone who's still trying to explore that.
And that's why I started and shut down a company in 3 days.
Long tenure. Great history. What was the company? Yeah, tell me everything.
So the paperwork that you fill out to like officially be an LLC is one piece of paper. And it's typically like name, address, name of company, hit submit. You're a company.
Yeah, pay us this much money.
Yeah, give me $100 check. You're a company now. And I did all of that paperwork because I had 2 consulting clients. I was feeling really confident, and I had just decided that, well, actually, I had moved to Nashville because I had a family member who was really, really sick. And this is before remote work was really a thing. And so everybody moved me to like a part-time job or a contract because there was no world in which you could be a full-time employee and not show up there at this time and then leave at this time.
And still do more work when you're not at work, but we're going to pretend like you can't actually do that during business hours. Do both.
Exactly. And so all of a sudden I was making like not even a quarter of what I was making because I sat somewhere different. And I filed my papers and I was so sure. I was like, this is it. I'm starting my company. I had a logo. everything. I ordered business cards.
Ooh.
And then 3 days later, I get an offer to be the chief marketing officer of one of those contracts. And
yeah, I'm going to take the chief
number was
job.
too good to be true. It was too good to be true. I think in entrepreneurship, there is a constant tension of like, should I just?
Okay, you're hitting something that hurts very deeply, and it's very true because, being independent is tough. You are doing your expertise, and then you're learning how to run a whole business on the side. And I'm fortunate to meet a lot of independent solopreneurs, and a lot of folks have that struggle of like, well, if this offer comes, there's benefits, there's a stable salary. There's a boss. It may be the CEO. It may not be a great boss, but like somebody else will tell me what to do sometimes, and that's nice.
Right. I'll get a check every 2 weeks, no matter how good my performance is or how much time I spend selling. Ooh, I'm going to take time off and still get a paycheck.
It's just a wild concept. It is a wild concept right now. So I get why maybe that chief title, and I assume all the accoutrements that go around with it, was very attractive. So you took it, I assume.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
Also grew up in a family where my parents' idea of a lot of money, that trickles down.
That trickles down. So how were, your parents who moved you to Pennsylvania so you could have education, who understand the life of like growing up on a farm and having limited options? What are they thinking at this point? Like, you are a chief marketing officer. That's kind of a big deal, I assume.
Oh, they are wearing this like a trophy, right? Like they raised a 20-something-year-old chief, whatever in Boston, right? Like I am big time for my family. At this point, I'm one of 3 people, parent, me, who has ever left a 100-mile radius of our farm.
Wow. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm big
time. For your britches, eh?
Oh, for sure. I had a team of 8. I'm working in downtown Boston. They're flying me in every other week because they want me to be available for meetings. They're shipping me to different spots to help with all of these things. I feel so important. I'm working, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single night. At that time, I had one of those weird rules that do not serve you, where I did not leave my desk unless I had fewer than 10 emails.
Oh, those days are so far behind me.
So far. Thank God. I
like to practice something called email bankruptcy, where I just select all, delete, and then assume that if they need me, they'll email me back. I'll yell bankruptcy. They don't hear it. It's fine.
So my team and I actually add something to our email signature that says you should not expect a response from me sooner than 48 hours.
I mean, fair. If it's true, it's fair.
And we explain it's because we want to be thoughtful about our response.
I'm here for that.
We want to actually consider what you're saying and think about it, especially if it's work related. So give us 48 hours. And if it's not a problem that can't wait 48 hours, it's probably not a real problem. And we need to take a step back because we write job postings for a living. We've skipped a step and I will back up. So at the time, I am working like a crazy person. I am splitting my time between Boston and Nashville. And I have a family member who has cancer. So it is just like full chaos of balance that's not actually balance at all because it involves me getting on an airplane at 5 a.m. on Mondays and getting on another airplane at 9 o'clock on Thursday. Repeat.
Yeah, and you're so in it at that point, right? Like you're so convinced, you're so focused on doing that next step. I got to go take care of my family member. I got to get on a plane. I got to go do this. I got to answer this email. You don't even realize how drowning you might be.
Oof. I wasn't even 30.
Oof.
And I'm doing all of these things. And I realize now, like, why we do want our chief whatevers to have a little more work experience and to have that lived experience of taking it all on and cracking a little. and bouncing back and adjusting. And it's, I think, why fractional work is so important too, is because sometimes you have a junior person who needs the support of someone at their level, not just someone junior to them, which is the situation that I was in, where no one was at my level because I was really, really good at my job, but my maturity as far as a manager was very, very young. And I probably needed that guide and probably shouldn't have even been in that job. And that's how I ended up getting fired.
Oh, no. Oh.
The timing of when I got fired was what made it so awful. And one of those, like, when I think about, like, those benchmarks where a lot of things could have changed and, like, I fundamentally changed, that was one of them for sure. Because I got fired. Well, technically they said, today's going to be your last day, the speech. So technically they let go.
I do know that speech. You were involuntarily terminated, and you can put whatever kind language, laid off, fired, walked out, whatever. Requested resignation.
I got the speech. But anybody who's ever heard me speak before knows that I got the speech about an hour after I found out that I was closing on my house in like 2 days.
There are bad times to be let go, and there are worse times to be let go. That's terrifying.
I had literally just so I was doing a new build at the time, and anyone who's been through a new build knows that it's constant moving targets as far as dates, because they'll not have this contractor in on time, and now the entire process is moved back 2 weeks, and this item is delayed, and that's why we won't be able to close until this date. And so, I mean, it got to the point, I was in an open office environment at the time, and the people who sat around me were like leaning over and being like, so what's the latest? Have we heard about the tile? What are we doing? I'm still...
You get so invested.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if one of their kids was in a soccer tournament, I knew about it, and I was asking if they won, they were surely invested in me getting a house. Right?
And your tile.
Yeah. And not to mention, I've hinted at this a few times. I was an Army brat. And so I moved 13 times before I graduated high school. And this was going to be my first home.
Oh, feels good to settle a little bit.
So I went into that meeting thinking, I'm going to tell my manager I'm buying a house.
Did you get those words out before they got their words out?
Oh, hell no.
Oh, no.
And this is the worst part. This is the part that nobody gets from stage, is the HR person dialed in about 4 minutes late.
Oh!
So he had already begun the conversation, and then she dials in and she goes, hi, Liz here. And I was like, she's like, is anyone there? And I was like, fucking here. I would never forget that as long as I live.
I mean, that's on that HR partner. That was a well-deserved F-bomb.
4 minutes.
Come on, you got to be 5 minutes early, babe.
And then my partner asked for a divorce.
Stellar week. You are just crushing this.
And was like, you can keep the house. So now
No, I don't have the money to keep the house because the job.
You get it, right?
Oh, Kat, that's terrifying.
Yeah. So there I am. I have no idea where my next paycheck is coming from. I just lost my big kid job that was supposed to change my world, and my whole family is so proud of me because I'm doing all these amazing things. And now I'm getting divorced, I'm unemployed, and I'm probably going to be real, real broke.
Ooh, where's your headspace? How are you feeling? How do you even begin to comprehend these 3 life events?
I job searched like it was a literal job. Right? I was applying every single day. I'm finding new jobs every single day. I mean, I was doing the forced refresh of the job boards. I was hustling. And I got really, really lucky because a friend of mine, Matt Charney, who still works in HR tech, still is a blogger, called me up one day and was like, hey, I got a job for you. He jokingly, my nickname at the time, because he worked with me at Monster many years ago, and the Monster network is wide and deep. and literally was like, hey, Kibbles, you want a job? Because my last name is Kibben.
Kibbles.
And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I want a job. It wasn't like the best job in the world, but it was doing marketing for a blog about recruiting. And I had like come back to my roots when I had started in HR tech. And that had really been like the first chunk of my career. I took this step away to go be a chief, whatever, and brought me on back to writing and being part of a marketing team.
I mean, I love that we circled back to writing since that's where we started. But also, I think look, I've gone from an executive to a not executive in my career line. But I think there's this interesting moment that happens where you do get to take a step back from responsibilities and expectations and get to focus on your craft instead of doing the job. And I'm curious, like, how was that experience change in responsibilities for you?
It was interesting because when I became the chief, I didn't get to do any work.
No, but you just got to do the job.
Yes, you get it, right? Like, I didn't get to write. I didn't get to create speaking engagements. I didn't get to travel to write or read or interview smart people. All I did was make sure the shit got done. I used to joke that the C in front of my name just stood for see me for the problems that you don't want to work on. Like, when you hit the wall, you go to the C whatever, and you officially hand them the problem in a nice little basket, and you let them handle it. And they're
remove the roadblocks, and yeah.
Exactly. And so I went from, and I hated that. But I also had this little panic in the back of my mind, like, my resume just got wild. Because I went social media ninja.
Ooh, you had a ninja title. How nice.
.com bubble, okay? I'm that old. Social media ninja, social media manager, director of marketing, VP of marketing, CMO, marketing manager.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wild, I can see how an unexperienced recruiter would scoff at that. But like, having lived a journey sort of similarly, I'm like, oh no, that path makes sense.
Yep. That's a reality.
It's reality.
Our careers are not linear. And I talk to so many job seekers who panic over that lack of the line. And I tell them all the time, lean into the weirdness. If there's weirdness, call it out. Like, I wish someone had told me that. The other thing I really wish someone had told me at that point in my life is that early in your career, jobs 1 through 4, your job is to learn how to do your job. Okay? So make lots of friends. Learn from anyone who will take any minutes to teach you anything. Because by job 4, if you do that, you can get a job with one of those people that you learned from. And my mistake was never going back to the people that I learned from. I thought I had to search the same way I did the first, second, and third time, which is open up the internet and type in a job title and hit enter.
Oh, that's so powerful. Like, jobs 1 through 4, making those connections. That's really what I think people miss about networking, is this early career opportunity to do it first while you're in learning mindset. And then when you go back to those people and you're like, look what I learned. Now here's what I'm looking for next. They are going to be your built-in champion.
Yep.
Ah, all right.
And so when I got back to this job, I was like, okay, I want to speak. I want to write. I want to do my things. But there wasn't a lot of infrastructure for that because being a marketing manager at the time was just like managing sponsors. like make sure webinar turns on, make sure this happens. But the coolest part is that it was time for me to get my PhD in recruiting, because all I did was listen to smart people and write about it. Listen, find smart people, write about it, right? And that literally is how that business made money. Is I would go find smart people, I would get them to do webinars for us, and someone would pay us to sponsor that webinar. And I just made sure the webinar turned on time and the recording hit. But all I did, I just got to learn and learn and learn.
Yeah, like day to day, it seems like a very tactful job, like just doing this execution, but really like the opportunity that you got there, I think a lot of people probably would have missed.
Yep. It was incredible. And one day they called me up and they were like, do you want to be the managing editor of the blog? And I'm like, I'm not a writer. Because at the time, right? So we have this 16-year-old version of Kat who was like, I'm going to be a writer. And then I just wanted the titles. I didn't care what I did. I didn't care how I did it. And I just distanced myself so far from that writing. I mean, I didn't even have a blog when I was in my junior years. I had none of this stuff. And by happenstance of, staffing and everything else, they were like, so you're going to write a blog 5 days a week. 5 days a week, you're going to publish on our behalf.
That's a lot.
And
That's a
you're going
lot.
to run webinars and you're going to write emails and. And I was so stuck because I'm like, I learned a lot about recruiting, but I don't know if I can write about it. And I only know how to write in my voice and I don't really know what I'm doing. And so I started voice to texting my writing because at the same time I got a puppy.
I was going to ask when we were going to talk about the puppy because it's on the line and I've been waiting for this moment.
She's on the line. Her name is Lyric.
Hi, Lyric.
Puppy Lyric needed to go out every hour when she was little. She was 5 pounds when I got her. She's now 75 pounds. And I could not focus at my desk. And so I started writing. And I started writing doing voice to text. And it made writing really, really easy for me.
Interesting.
Because I can think through an idea. If you give me an outline, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what we're going to talk about because I had this wealth of experience. Like I can't think of a single person who watched as many webinars as I did, read as many blogs as I did, wrote as many white papers. I mean, and this is pre-ChatGPT, so everything came between the ears here.
It was ChatGPT.
Exactly. Well, and I also had the benefit of having other really good writers around me. And just like really good personalities and smart people like Jackie Clayton and Matt is a really good writer and William Tincup and like just people I never would have met otherwise who are good souls who have big ideas. And so I started to write again. And that's when I was like, oh, I love writing. I love this. Like I love telling these stories. And to this day, I still follow that exact same format where
Really?
I tell a personal story. I help people understand why the concept matters to them or to their life or like the emotional value of something. I share data next, and then I share a how-to. No joke. If you were to look at any of my blogs for the last 10 years.
Oh, I'm thinking about some of it. There's sprinkles of this in your LinkedIn writing, like story forward, data to back it up, make me care about the issue. Like this is kind of core to your writing style.
Yeah, and it made it easy. It made it.
Oh, that's nice.
People are always very surprised to know that, like when I write my weekly letters, so on Fridays I write a letter about life because I don't actually think there's a separation between work and life. We just exist.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of a flywheel. If one's going well, the other one will go well. They are related.
And they laugh when they find out that it takes me about between 15 and 19 minutes to write those letters. The good ones take less time because it is ease to me now because I built that muscle walking the dog. My neighbors probably thought I was a psycho, but
that's fine. That's interesting because I won't call myself a writer yet, but as a aspiring fledgling poster, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to synthesize thoughts, to make them clear, to get the words in the right order. So 19 minutes is a dream.
Yeah. Well, and it prepared me for a job I never, ever expected to have. So let's be honest, I got tired of doing all of that, right? 5 blogs a week is...
5 blog, managing what? Yeah, I can see how that would get me out.
I needed the corporate job. I got the it, right? You learn so much about recruiting. You're like, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go do it somewhere. But again, the average recruiter looks at my resume and they don't see that. They don't see that this person clearly has the chops to go in and do pretty much any operations job because I've learned how to map the recruiting operations of some of the biggest companies in the world. And exactly how they fixed a lot of the problems that are so common inside of recruiting companies. But luckily, a friend of mine was like, hey, I know somebody looking for a technical copywriter who does employer branding. And she made the connection. She is a great recruiter and made this connection that like, oh, you should go talk to them. And they offered me this incredible job to go be a technical copywriter for one of the largest staffing companies in the country and serve their top clients. So think Nike, Honeywell, Walmart. I mean,
Wow.
huge organizations, and I'm writing their EVPs. I'm writing their communications to candidates. I'm writing job postings. I'm creating.
Well, you're creating all their documentation.
Even cooler, though, I have this opportunity to interview employees at scale and translate that into their language and use my brain of personalization meets data to create some of honestly, the copywriting that I'm most proud of from my entire life.
I mean, truly, like you're able to get this wealth of experience. You're bringing in your expertise. I'm assuming you're finding out how to write in a voice beyond your own, which is huge. I can only imagine you were crushing it at this job. They must have loved you.
I loved this job, but I worked for the worst manager.
Oh, how it will ruin a great job so quickly.
It's like those work and life flywheels. The trip point is the manager.
Yeah. A bad managerial job or a manager who refuses to understand. Like, I actually have a lot of grace for inexperienced managers, but like one who is not willing to learn is tough.
I remember the first time I sensed something was off. I followed up with the other creative on the team who was a designer, and we were kind of tag team on taking on the delivery of a lot of these projects. And they were like, no, he's always like this. And at the time, I saw him as an inspirational leader. I wanted to be him because he treated me so well, up to the point in which I challenged him.
Treated you great till he didn't.
Yep. I was offered a job that he wanted within the organization to move halfway around the world to Singapore and be the head of employer brand for the APAC division. And he, in the middle of the street in Singapore, in the middle of the night, screamed at me and said that I was too big for my britches. And I mistakenly responded with, you would never say this to me if I was a man.
And it might not be untrue, but no one likes to, yeah, that's a tough mirror to hold up.
Because what I did in that moment is I created the cause. And so if he were going to fire me, we both know that would have come up in litigation and it would have been an issue. And so instead, he took two persistent attacks on my character and my talent. And I think we've all had that boss who just like nitpicks you. It's like the ice pick that's just trying to get you to quit.
Were you in Singapore during this or did you not take the What country are you in?
So I was based out of the US. We had visited Singapore for 15 days to execute a global EVP, and he had chosen me to travel around the world with him to execute this VP. So mind you, there are like many people between he and he's still having me go and do this because, again, I just have a wealth of recruiting experience and knowledge because of that last job and just my career up to that point. But my job title on paper, everyone's like, what the hell are you doing here? But it's because he knew I was smart and I knew what I was doing and I knew why we were doing it. And so if there were a copywriting question, I was the person who could talk about the strategy and understand why that word, why this thought, why whatever. And so we ended that trip. We come back. And if anyone who's listening to this is a copywriter, you know, like Nike is the OG of copywriting. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like across the board, if you think about great marketing copy, Nike, right? Nike, Apple. I mean, they have branded in a incredible way, and Nike knows they're great. So there I am. I am writing Nike TA. I'm writing the EV for Nike's TA group. And I missed a punctuation mark on a slide. Now, context of my life. So one period on one bullet on one slide of 35 slides. Context of my life is I'm caregiving for my mother, who had rheumatoid arthritis and ripped every single tendon in both of her hands on the same day, pulling up the sheets on her bed. That's how brittle her hands and bones and everything were. So I was caregiving for 12 hours a day and working for 12 hours a day.
That's unsustainable.
I missed a punctuation mark.
How dare you?
How dare I? And
I'm sure that went over delightfully with this boss who absolutely loves you.
He set up a feedback meeting. He invites one of the VPs because at this point he knows he's in liability territory. So I have an audience for this, in which he tells me that I am not a writer and I have no talent.
Sweet.
And he never should have hired me.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
I'm 10 months into this job. Okay. I'm already worried about my resume. It doesn't make sense at this point. CMO, managing editor, technical copywriter, question mark. Okay.
Sort of head of employee brand. I don't know.
Right. Sort of global head of employer brand. Like, what the fuck? And I hang up the phone and I cry harder than I think I've cried in my whole life. And I march out to the living room and where my mother is propped up on a chair with both of her hands in the, like on a resting pad watching Real Housewives of whatever at the time.
Insert city.
And I said, I'm quitting that fucking job and I'm starting my own company.
Yes, Kat.
She says, no, you're not.
Damn it, Mom. With your Syracuse and your... You never let me do what I want.
She goes, you have great benefits. You just got to go to Singapore.
Did she pull out a spreadsheet?
She couldn't. Hands are in the air.
Hands. Mom.
And I said, I will never let anyone talk to me like that again.
Hell yeah.
Can't. And so every single thing she said to me, I was just like, no, I'm starting a company. It was a Thursday. That Monday, I gave 2 weeks notice.
I love that.
Over the next 2 weeks, I picked the name 3 Ears Media, named after 2 dogs with 4 ears. I wrote a presentation and got myself into SourceCon, which was the event that was exactly 2 weeks from that Monday. I created a website. I figuratively decided what my company would do. By the way, my company does none of those things. Not
right.
One of those things now.
Of course. Well, you got to go through some iterations and changes. Totally get it.
And that Monday, I launched my company, and that afternoon, I signed my first client.
Fuck yeah. Damn, I know a lot of people who are going to hear that line and be so jealous.
Only because I had that bucket of doing it around an event. And so I always tell people the big deal about launching your company, and the thing that I got the benefit of seeing that most people don't, is that a long lead time is not a good thing.
Interesting.
So a
just
lot
do
of
it.
people
Rip
would
the Band-Aid
tell you,
off.
get 12 customers and then do this and then do this. And I understand why that is a valuable strategy, but I would not tell a single person you're doing that. What you're going to do is create a 2-week launch plan, which is what I did. And I hinted and I hinted and then I hinted. And by the day I got to that event and I was getting on stage, people were like, what are you doing with your life? You have hinted so much and I want to know. And every person who would privately message me, I'll be like, nope, you're going to have to.
Oh, you were lock and key. You were really greasing the wheels before you launched. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I understand.
Right? I was like, I kind of need to figure stuff out because I got money stuff and I need money and I own a house and I really need no joke. And that was the first day of 3 Ears Media. And yeah, that was my
Hell yeah.
entrepreneur journey, because I can tell you right now, after that 3-day stint, there is no world in which I would have done entrepreneurship on purpose unless someone burned me that bad.
I mean, really, like, had you gotten another CMO offer, another chief level officer, maybe.
Right?
But I mean, I don't want to skip ahead on the journey line. From outside looking in, it seems like 3 years media has been chef's kiss, quite the delightful adventure.
I got really, really lucky because I kind of fell into the job post writing as a specialty and then got really, really invested in it because I had kind of that PhD mentality about recruiting problems. I wanted to understand the depth of the problem. And I was willing to do a lot of research. I actually wrote 1,000 job postings for free.
That's so many job postings.
But you know what? I probably got 500 speaking gigs talking about those 1,000 job postings. And that fed the first 6-7 years of my business. Like,
man, I would love to think that I've written 1,000 job postings. I'm sure somewhere close to it. And I cannot say that number 999 was any better than number 1. So thank you for what you do.
We'll talk about that somewhere.
Yeah, that's a personal problem. So you're crushing 3 years media. You go on stage, and then the next point.
And then
I've kind of been excited. This is just such an interesting point in your journey.
It is.
You're living in a van down by the river, but not quite.
Right. Okay, so I had just gotten divorced again. So life is just like,
that's a lot of paperwork, my friend.
Don't even get me started. I am living in this apartment that is like barely decorated because I've gotten rid of my stuff and moved across the country at like 4 times at this point. And at this point, I'm sitting in Colorado, looking at these beautiful mountains, being like, "What the hell am I doing? Just sitting here in Boulder." And I was running my company, and I got this like spiritual guide because the 2020 happened right in the middle of my business. So 2018, I started. 2019, I got great momentum. 2020, January, I had 20 speaking engagements booked for the year. And a bunch of job post writing projects, and every single thing fell through that March.
Yeah, that was a tough March.
Next February, I'm divorced, living in this apartment. And I'm like really seeking joy.
Yeah.
I'm like looking for my work to matter in a way that isn't just putting money in my bank account. Because if all I wanted to do was put money in my bank account, I would go get a job. And so I meet a few friends randomly through speaking events and everything else who are living in vans and traveling. And mind you, I had never even been camping.
Really? I feel like with an Army-esque background, you would have spent a few nights in the woods.
My family is cheap, and my mom's idea of a really good night is sitting in a leather chair with a pack of cigarettes and a book, okay? Like, none of this outdoor
Sounds lovely.
stuff.
All right.
And I was just really, really craving something different. And she asked me, and it was the first time in my life that I'd kind of gotten permission to be a speaker without having to worry about the airport, right? We were doing all those virtual events. I wasn't worried about having to travel to every single thing. Like, I actually had freedom. And at this point, as much as everyone else saw it as this lockdown, I saw it as free because I didn't have to do work the same way I'd always done it.
Amazing.
Long story short, I decided I went on a few trips and rented vans and went out camping, and I came back, and on the very last trip, and I didn't know it was my last trip, but I said, if I can enjoy this, I'll do it. And it was 4 days in Las Vegas in August.
That's a big ask to enjoy. I think that's a great standard to set for yourself.
Yep. But I wrote so much that weekend, and I felt like me again. I felt like a writer who was living their life and did work.
Yeah.
And I attached it to a speaking gig. So I like went out into the woods in Vegas, which has a ton of really cool things, by the way. Very, very close.
I mean, gorgeous if you get outside of the city.
Valley of Fire. I mean, easy drives. But I come back disgusting, right? Like I'd been in the woods for 4 days. I had not showered. It was so sweaty. I didn't even have like flushing toilets for 4 days. And I walk back, hand over these keys to this very nice gentleman who rented me his van. And I go to the Vegas hotel and I'm taking a shower and just like feeling the filth wash off of me. And I was like, I'm doing it. I'm getting a van.
I mean, I feel like when you go from I've been shitting in the woods for 4 days to a nice luxury shower and you're still like, I'm in. Like, it's a good sign.
And no shit, I'm flying back home. I hit the ground in Denver. I opened my Instagram and the very first post is a van for sale that's in my neighborhood.
The algorithm knows. So you buy the van.
And I named it Noah, like the Ark.
Oh.
Which is not on my journey line, but I named it that because on my way to my very first stop, I saw my friend Barb had passed away from COVID, and her husband, it's a very sad story, but he left the Christmas tree up because that was her favorite thing in the whole world. And she had died like a full year earlier. And I stopped in at his house and there's that tree. And he told me the story and he said, I leave it up because every time I need her to send me a message, I find an ornament or something on the tree that tells me exactly what to do. And I stopped and I looked at the tree at that time and I saw Noah's Ark. And I'm not a super religious person by any means, but I love a good extended metaphor. And Noah is kind of the perfect extended metaphor in which you take on a trip that you never expected to take in the middle of a flood. And you take the items that matter most and you go out and you just have faith that God's going to put you exactly where you belong.
Oh my God. I love an extended metaphor.
That's my whole life, though.
That's your whole life.
It's my whole life. And it brought me back to writing and it allowed me space to write my very first book about.
So you are not in a van right now. How long did you do van life? What was it like? Like, obviously freeing and annoying and probably expensive in unknown ways.
It is the ultimate trial in learning to live through uncertainty. And it's exactly what I needed to be prepared for whatever's happening in the world from here. I know, right? Now, I'm sure people will listen to this. Obviously, they're not going to listen to this today.
It is January 16th today, if you'd like a mile marker stone of our timeline and the faces that I'm making.
Right. And if you're not putting together this math, the inauguration is just a couple of days ahead. And if you are a human being, you have questions about what's ahead. Literally, no matter what side of the aisle you sit on, I think we all are questioning what is ahead, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. And I think the book and the next book that I have inside of me that I'm really excited I'm working on right now is, I'm going to say it with my whole chest, I believe it is the work that my whole life added up to.
Fuck yeah.
Because it is teaching other people how to live through drastic uncertainty. And the leadership lessons that I figured out, they're life lessons, but they actually are very, very important for us as leaders as we kind of guide people. Because the truth is that the separation between work and life becomes more blurred every single time there's a tragedy in this world. And there's constant tragedy and there's constant chaos. But our responsibility, the only way we'll ever build trust with our team is to build reliability during uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that we tell them everything. It doesn't mean that every manager writes a journey line and
either or
little detail. But I think what it does is it allows us to be people that others can rely on when things get hard. And that is the definition of community to me.
Oh, amazing.
I want to make the world a better community for each other and help us all learn how to be better.
Oof. I think we all want that. So you spend time in a van. I assume, travel the country, yeah?
I went coast to coast 3 times in 3 years.
Oh my gosh. I mean, 3 times in 3 years. Cool. And you are not in a van right now.
No, I sold my van to a traveling nurse. Again, it like worked out all the magic. I posted it. She went out and looked at a bunch of vans. She picked mine because funny enough, her mom was going to name her Noah when she was a kid, and she found out the name of the van, and it was like this perfect full circle moment. And it felt empowering and a little scary to hand off those keys and kind of decide that now my life is stationary and I'm not just going to pack it all up and leave again.
Yeah. Where'd you land?
I landed in Rockford, Illinois, which is on the border of Illinois and Wisconsin. And I picked it. Everyone's kind of like, you traveled the whole country and you landed in
Rockford, Illinois, eh?
I know. Honestly, I really have lived in more places than I think pretty much anyone I know. And there's something very, very special about this place. There's both the literal things that make Illinois special in that they have a lot of trans rights built into their state rights. They've built a lot of equity and access for everyone. So it's a place in which we don't just talk about happy stories. We actually create the structures that make it possible for everyone to have a good
happy
story.
stories have to be created. Oh,
But also, Rockford has a really, really incredible culture. We have a theater that was created in the 1920s and is kept up to 1920 standards. So every little detail is like walking into history. We have incredible food. We have a river that runs through the middle of our city. So you get that indoor outdoor, and the people here are good Midwestern folks with big hearts who work really, really hard and have big aspirations of making the world better too.
oh my gosh, Kat, that is gorgeous. I know. It's okay to love where you live and love the people and the community of where you live. I love that. I feel the same about my little town.
When you feel like your heartbeat in other people, that's when you know you're where you belong. And that rhythm is so different for everybody. And that's what you learn when you travel in a van and you get to go to all the places you never stop when you're a speaker. You know, like you don't end up in rural New Mexico when you're going to Santa Fe. You don't end up in the place 4 hours outside of LA when you go to LA for a speaking gig. And I got to experience many, many different communities, what made them work, what made them didn't work. And also just like to truly know what you love, where your heart beats.
How delightful that you can experience all those different rhythms and then find the one that matches.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's like this whole journey line, as I thought about it, was just like my story of how I started to believe that I'm a writer. And today, like when I talk about myself, I'm not a founder, I'm not a CEO, I'm not the technical copywriter. I'm just a writer at 3 Years Media.
You're more than just a writer, but quite a writer at that. Kat, that brings us to the end of your journal/journey line. Tell the folks, where can they find you? Where should they seek you out? What you got going on?
Yeah. So the company, like I said, it's 2 dogs with 4 ears. But the name of my company is 3, like the number, ears, like the ones on your head, media.com. And that's where the blog is and everything else that we do. And the big thing that I would really love for everyone to check out is our new blog series. We're taking on those recruiting challenges that I learned about during that PhD and asking different questions about those problems to say, like, I think we can do better and actually bring the data to justify why we should change.
Cool. Well, I will make sure all of that is linked down below in the description so folks can easily find it, as well as your journey line. But that brings us to the end. And I think maybe we should just leave our listeners with never forget, comparison is the thief of joy. And you have the opportunity to write your own journey line. Kat, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. And